TIE is committed to fostering innovation and entrepreneurship globally. We are on a mission to give voice to TIE and a platform to share its collective wisdom. With that end, we've launched a monthly podcast series called TIE Talks, where we talk to exceptional leaders on topics around emerging technologies, innovation, disruption happening all around us. So today we have a very special episode where we are speaking to two very young entrepreneurs, Krish and who's 18, who started out a venture capital firm after building out his company in the gaming startup space in India, as well as Samyak, who's building out something in the biotech and pet nutrition space only at the young age of 21. Both of them have some very inspiring journeys, challenges they faced, as well as learnings on how to really take such bold decisions very early on in their career. And I'm really looking forward to learn from them. So welcome. First podcast for both of you. Excited, nervous?
Very nervous. Very excited.
You know, both of you have had very diverse journeys, but something really common that's bound both of your journeys, which has been around, you dropped out of school to start something, and then went on to start your own VC fund. You dropped out of university in India, came to Singapore, and then started Possible Foods. This is a very bold step to take at such a young age. What's been sort of your journey, inspiration? Krish, we'll go first with you.
Sure. So, with the first startup, what we were building is we said we wanted to solve the issue that we faced as gamers. So when we moved into Web3 gaming, which is for us really, really new at the time, we realized the whole process wasn't designed for people without crypto knowledge. And we wanted to make that accessible for everyone. And when we started getting good progress and good traction, then we said it makes sense to now step out of school and put full time into it. And the same step with the startup, with the fund. We said if we're doing something of value that requires full-time effort to make it possible, I don't think you should stop to do it. And similarly to Samyak, I've continued my education on the side.
Yeah, and I think in our space, personally for me, I wouldn't call it dropping out per se, but the opportunity was too big to give up in terms of, the Singapore government giving you a full scholarship, being at NUS, and at large being in Singapore. That was the aim, because this is the place to be for biotech and food tech at large with regards to policy, regulation and innovation. So yeah, came to NUS, met my co-founder here, who incidentally also dropped out of Stephens in India after a year to be here. So I think, for us it was just the opportunity. Being at NUS was very big to give up.
And give me a bit of sense on what are the trends in the nutrition space, in the biotech space. What made you choose that space?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it has to do with food security, especially in places like Singapore, the Middle East, Hong Kong. And the idea is that protein demand will more than double by 2050. And when that happens, our existing food systems will simply crumble due to really two reasons: population growth and climate change. And that'll be a positive feedback loop. So it's very important we start thinking of better ways of producing protein. Those trends are really strong in places like Singapore or anywhere that's really dependent on food import. So the larger trend is how can we make the supply chain for food more resilient for both climate change and population growth at large. And that's really where capital is going into as well.
So Krish, for you as well, given that you're in the gaming space and there's been a fair amount of traction, but also some regulatory challenges there, talk to me a bit about what are you focusing on there?
Sure. So within gaming, there's three main sections. You have Web2 traditional gaming, you have Web3 gaming, which is blockchain and crypto gaming, and you have RMG, which is real money gaming. We are focused on the traditional gaming side. In the gaming industry in India, we see massive pickup and consistent growth in Web2 gaming. In Web3 gaming and RMG, there was massive rise, but they faced the regulatory challenges. Traditional gaming hasn't faced any regulatory challenges. In the market in India, we're seeing a growth like it happened in China. Today in China, every Uber driver has a phone open on the side when they're driving, playing games. Today in India, almost every single security guard, when you go up to them, you can see them playing some type of game on their phone. It is massive. The gaming industry in India has over 500 million people, and the innovation is consistently happening. With the device qualities improving and the accessibility for mobile gaming, the user base is growing 17% year on year, and it's consistently becoming really, really big.
One of my favorite quotes from this book called The Hard Things About the Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And, Ben and Mark are speaking, and Ben asks Mark, what is your favorite thing about startups? And he says, there's only two emotions that exist, euphoria and terror, mostly at the same time. So I know a lot about all of the stuff that you're enjoying. Tell me a little bit about, what are some of the key challenges you both have faced in your journeys as you've tried to build out and scale, companies in very, very different spaces?
So I think the first thing I realized, and I forgot who told me this, but in life you need to balance work, life, and health, and you're only going to get two of them if you decide to do a startup. So there's a lot you have to let go of and a lot that you have to sacrifice of. But I think at the end of the day, if you're building something that resonates with you, with what you're passionate with, no matter what you'd have to put back or sacrifice, in your mind it's not a sacrifice, it's just doing more for what you believe in.
Yeah, and for us, I think we're in a space where part of the reason why we also left India was we were asked to get a PhD before we ventured out into building in biotech. Most of the people we are talking to usually have 10 or 15 years in either industry or academia. And when we started out, we were like 2 year one undergraduates trying to build out in biotechnology. So that's been a challenge just from an industry perspective. When you talk to like academia, when you talk to industry, when you talk to, essentially venture capitalists and so on, it's improved a lot for sure. But overall, what has really helped us, it was a challenge, was of course balancing, all of the three, in particular being like a full-time student at NUS and running the startup. But NUS has really come in and helped us a lot in that, like, I think 40 or 45% of our degree is now research for the startup, and that brings in a lot of credibility as well. So I think, the challenge has just been, how do you prove that you're serious, even if you're like 18 or 20, so on and so forth.
One of the key sort of pillars of TIE is really on mentorship and sort of community development. And, that's something super important to us. Talk to us a little bit about what are the roles any mentors have played for you.
I think we very openly say that Possible wouldn't exist without certain individuals and certain institutions. I think going back to the very core, it's Arman, my co-founder, and my dad, who have both run like traditional manufacturing businesses. And sometimes in the world of startups, you really lose sight of what's important, right? And at the end of the day, it's making sound business decisions that will eventually generate revenue, if not in the present. And it really brings us back to what's important. But apart from that, we've also been fortunate to have like really great industry mentors both here in Singapore and in India. Some of them have built out unicorns. Some of them are like CXOs of companies that are probably publicly listed now. And of course, then you have like the institutions that have gone on that have helped us. So in Singapore, it's been NUS and NTU primarily, but we've also got support from DBS. TIE was part of one of our first grants that we got within Singapore India Hackathon and so on and so forth. But I think it's been like a great mix of people who have been there, done that, as well as institutions who could really help with credibility and resources and just have like that sheer, raw strength to push things. Like 10,000, 20,000, now we're talking about a $50,000 or $200,000 grant is like a huge amount for like a company starting out. But for institutions such as NUS or even Princeton, they're like, okay, you know what, it's a shot we can take, and if it pays off, it pays off. So mentoring and just support has been really, really helpful, and hopefully one day we can pay it back.
So for me, I think firstly it would be my dad. The most important thing that he taught me was when you talk to a founder, connect with them emotionally and spiritually. A lot of people approach investing nowadays like a shark, and I remember he told me it's called angel investing, but there's no more angels, there's only sharks. So, and that's one of the things we really, really like with TIE. The whole community is built around the empathy towards the founder. And I've been in the founder shoes, so I understand how scary it is to go out and raise your first round of funding when you don't have metrics, you don't have a product, and it's really hard to get people to believe in your vision. So to approach a founder and understand that they are just someone who is trying to build something of value. And then sometimes, even if you don't see the vision yet, you should take a bet and back them and be with them and assist as much as you can. And that's one of the most important things I learned from my dad. And that has helped a lot because it's helped us build the brand of our fund. Even if we don't invest, we try to help as much as possible, spend as much time with as many founders as possible, even help people incubate ideas for next to no financial gain. But if you grow the ecosystem, it'll grow your brand with it. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I worked at a startup for a couple months in India when I was 17 called Listo. And the founder there has been one of the biggest helps in our journey. He was one of the advisors in the first startup, and when the Web3 gaming market crash happened and we moved out of that startup, he said, come and work for me for 6 months. So packed up from Singapore, moved to India. He let me shadow him directly for 3 months. I was in sales for 3 months. and got a full understanding of what it takes to become a tier A founder. And how do you build that tier A team around you? Alongside that, it was a gaming company in India as well. The full expansion and understanding of the scene, building my first few connections there. To this day, he's our executive advisor, works with us in the fund, sits on my IC board. And I think my dad and Sadiq, who's the founder there, has been monumental for me.
So I think the key themes I take away from that, number one, parents. And I think many of us charter members, as well as the audience, are also parents of kids. And hopefully we can inspire them to do this one day and shape how they, drive their future. I think number two, what I took away was what you said, which is, go do this yourself, right? Try it out in a live environment, and that'll give you hopefully the ability to test out, learn from the best, and then try, build it yourself. And then third, what you said, which is about organizations and how do we tap into the collective power of the ecosystem to really build this out. Now, one of the other questions is, of course, as a founder, we love to be passionate about the core thing that we are building, which is in your case, for example, gaming is, and for you, more on biotech. But there is so much of sales as well as just going and marketing what you're building out. And that can be hard, especially when you're young. Even when you're doing this to organizations like NUS, you have to go and pitch. How have you found that journey?
So I think the first thing with pitching is when you reach a certain point, pitching changes. When you start pitching and you're young, without any product and you just have the idea, it's kind of looked at more as, oh, okay, you're trying to start something, that's cute. Sure, we'll have a look. But eventually, as you start to build traction, as you start to build metrics, for us, we're a 10 million fund. Once we got to that 50% mark, when we approached investors, the conversation was really, really different. They started to look at us really differently. We have done 4 deals so far. So when they were able to show our deals, show the traction from how the founders are looking at us, show how much we've progressed with closing our fund, investors start to take that really, really different. And I think your age goes from more of something that turns into, that you get looked down on, to something you get admired to.
Yeah, I think I agree. The fact that we are now 21-year-olds in this space has become like our biggest advantage. Starting out, it was our biggest disadvantage. Because I'm not saying we've done all the work, but there's a certain amount of proof of work and we still have a long way to go. Coming to how we go about marketing, I think, so I was talking to this deep tech founder from a company called Pixel in India. They're a space tech company backed by NASA, probably the only private Indian space tech company to have raised in excess of, $150-200 million. And what I realized and what we also try and do is like our ability, or the core ability for us as founders outside of the obvious building the biotech, is our ability to talk to a scientist who spent 15 years at a university, but also to talk to a CSO of a pharmaceutical company, simultaneously to a person who's running a pet nutrition brand, but also a lawyer who's like working on IP so that our patents and our IP is taken care of. So really, as a founder, what you have to learn, and it's something, it's like a core in my understanding, is you have to be able to talk to everyone and be relatable to everyone. Because in most pitches or in most competitions, in most grants, the judges or the panel might not be people from your space. Or a venture capital firm that you want to talk to might not be like in your space. So are you able to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but essentially dumb it down, but also hold your ground when you're talking to someone who's in industry.
I love that, because I think, we talk about agility a lot, but really being able to be agile with people, being able to understand what are their motivations, incentives, and being able to then pitch to them is, to me, a big superpower for founders. And it's amazing that you've both learned some of these skills so early in your careers. I think so. Let's fast forward a few years. Yeah, you're both so young. Where do the next 10 years shape for you?
Yeah, so I think for us it's very clear. The reason we're doing this is because we want to build a career in the future of food. We're fairly sure that we want to be at the intersection of biotech and food for like the foreseeable 25-30 years. Like that's where we see our career in. But coming to like a company perspective, what we really want to do is we're working on 3 divisions, so to say. One is feedstock conversion. So how can you convert food side streams or any sort of carbon-based waste into fermentable sugars? We're working, the second division is strain engineering, where how do you make better fungal strains or better like microorganisms for doing what we want to do. And third is bioreactor design. So across the next 10 years, we really want to build a stack of technology that can be given to anyone who's looking to transition from traditional forms of food into futuristic forms of food. So that's what the next 10 years look like. But definitely very bullish on a career in this space for sure.
So the next 10 years for us at the fund looks like that we want to position ourselves in the center of the gaming ecosystem at the start. For our Fund 2 and for our Fund 3, as we scale up the fund size, our goal is to always remain in pre-seed because that is where the industry lacks. In India today, there is no real support for a pre-seed founder in gaming when they're pre-idea, pre-traction. We want to build out that entire ecosystem. So for us, we say we want to be the pillar of support for the gaming industry in India. So to take everything from our LP ecosystem that we've put together, and we are very selective with our LPs, we only take people who either have a value add to us or to our end position, and we don't take pure financial investors. On the other side, we've set up partnerships, we've set up communities, we're building the brand of the fund, we help everyone as much as possible, and the plan is as we start scaling up, we increase our connections globally, we make India one of the largest forces in the world in gaming, and we continually expand our help capability. So we're looking to hire people who are purely on the operator basis and put them directly within our companies, our portfolio companies. So the thought process is, how do we continually make ourselves the best ecosystem builder and the best value add for companies in India? I mean, a great example of this is one of our advisors, Ramakant. He's a co-founder of LiveSpace. In half of the tech companies that are becoming successful today, in some way, shape, or form, he's on the cap table and he's there. And he told me, half the time I invest not just because I want to gain money, but just because I like the founder and want to support them.
Yeah.
And because of that, every single founder comes to him for their pre-seed round because of how much he supports and how much value he brings to them. And that's what we want to build out for our fund.
I love that because, that's what I do in B Capital. So, B Capital, which is one of our VC firms here, we have this thing where we say we are built by founders for founders, and we don't want to be just passive investors and just provide capital. We genuinely feel like we want to support companies through the investing life cycle, whether that's through go-to-market, strategy, capital advisory, talent, all of those pieces, because the founder needs so much more support, particularly on the early stages. So I love that approach that you're working towards. What has been like the number one challenge you've both faced? I know you talked about age and how that's actually pivoted to being more of a strength rather than a setback. Has there been anything else that's been top of mind for you, which has been challenging over the last few years?
So I think for me, the biggest challenge was having to shut down my first startup. So we raised our pre-seed round, we built most of our product, everything was looking smooth, we were having a great time, and then the entire Web3 gaming market had completely tanked when the Web3 space tanked as well. And now it's had a rise back, but as it tanked, for 2 months, I kept trying to think of a way to fix the solution. How do I make it work? How do I make a market work that isn't there right now? And eventually I had to come home and say, I don't think this is working. And I remember on that day, I was delaying how long I stayed at the office because I didn't want to come home and tell my dad that this doesn't make sense anymore. But I remember the day after I did that, when I started working on the next thing, it was probably one of the best I had felt in a while. Because intellectual honesty is extremely important, not just with other people, but also with yourself. And as a founder, you want to make what you're doing work, no matter what. And sometimes you have to look at something and say, I need to pivot. I need to move to the next thing because this isn't right now. And that's a really tough decision to make.
So Possible initially started out as a D2C brand in smarter pet nutrition, but very quickly Arman and I realized that we want to be more involved in the biotech, the B2B side of things, because building our technology was what really is what really drives us. But when we went out to the D2C product, it was not about the technology. It was all about, making reels, marketing, what is the messaging going across to the end customer. People were not interested in the technology. People were buying our product because there was flaxseed in it. D2C businesses are businesses I really respect. But me and Arman very quickly figured out that we want to be building in technology, and that's what we find value in. And on the D2C front, we had guys who were like IIT, IIM, guys from design school. You have like your ISD, the NIFs of the world, and so on and so forth, who are working on the D2C front. And when we decided to, shut that division and pivot, one was really personally, we were trying to figure out, has all the work we've done over the past 6 months just gone to waste essentially? And the second challenge was I didn't know, it was not in me to tell people who are elder to me that, listen, we are shutting down this division, and as a company we're not going to be doing, or what you're doing is not what the company is going to be doing anymore. But yeah, I think at large pivots are hard, but now I feel like we're more agile as a company, and if we have to pivot in the future, we would probably like the lead time needed would like reduce by a lot, because you're just comfortable being honest to yourself, like trying to delay the decision as much as possible. Now it's just like, yeah, we need to do this.
It's a lot easier.
I think the number one skill a founder needs to have is the ability to make quick decisions, learn, test, pilot, scale, and love that you both tried it and learned from it. So what's been sort of your biggest achievement over the last few years? What would you say has been that number one thing that stood out to you and been personally very fulfilling?
So I think on the personal side for both Arman and I, the biggest achievement was, getting a full scholarship to be studying at NUS, because contrary to what people believe, university still is very relevant today. Sure, what's being taught might not be relevant, but the idea of a university, especially like a top 20 university, is still very relevant. And if we had to like track back to what has enabled us the most, it's the backing and the credibility of coming from like a institution, especially in our space, which is very, very science driven.
Especially because you were saying that at NUS you spend a large part of your coursework actually on building up your startup.
So we're talking to professors, we're talking to industry, we're talking to the tech transfer office, and what's the best, most optimal way to commercialize these technologies. And people just generally look up if you're like, okay, we're students at NUS and we're building this company, and NUS gave us our first grant,
right,
so on and so forth. And I think the second achievement happened recently, which was the WTF fund that Nikhil Kamath in India was running. So he selected like 10 companies run by founders under 25, and he gave each one of them like a $25,000 grant. And that's really opened a lot of doors. So yeah, that's been great. And I would encourage anyone who's under the age of 25 to apply to them. Because yeah, that can be game changing.
I think for us, so we've just recently hit or about to hit our first close. So originally we were a 6 million fund, but we've got about 6.5 committed. We've increased our fund size to 10 million. We've closed 4 deals. So I think the first big achievement that happened recently for me was being able to raise the fund, actually be able to go out there as a solo GP and say what we're building has value. We understand how to do it, and here's how we're going to do it, and actually have the market respond back to that with validation out of our LPs. We've got a lot of people who are within the gaming industry who believe really, really strongly, to the point that we have access to their M&A teams to work with them for the fund. They give us access to their early stage deal flow, and they've put a lot of support and infrastructure behind us, and that validation and that belief is one of the biggest achievements we have. And I think another thing on the early side for me was when I got my first exit. Because when you invest in an early stage company, that money is kind of in paper. You don't really see it.
How long did it take to get that?
So it was 13 months, and we returned 13x.
That's incredible.
It was quite fortunate, but it was a really, really high quality company, and we were able to get a really, really good exit there. So we've got about 3 exits now, and this is on me personally, as I've done my angel investing. But being able to get that first exit, experience the fact that, okay, the money is actually here.
Just a question, if I may add. Like, how do you decide if it's the right time to exit versus holding on? Because good companies you'd want to hold on to, or do you have like a fund philosophy where you have a defined exit?
Sure. So I think for me, it kind of differs on the personal side to the fund side. On the personal side, they were getting picked up by a VC. So the exit was, I wanted to exit half, but it wasn't really a choice. We were into a full exit. But on the fund side, the thesis is we invest early, under $5 million valuation for the first check, and get 5% ownership. Follow on with $1 million on the next round, and then exit at a 7 to 15x period when we start exiting from that point of follow on. And that kind of returns our fund performance. We worked all the numbers. So we have an aim of 5x return on our fund in 7 + 1 years. And then you have to work backwards from there. To achieve 5x, what is our valuation range for exits? And then that's how we make our decisions on when we want to exit.
You know, one of the things you both talked about is just sort of what shaped your journeys, whether it's mentors, whether it's your parents. What has sort of been that value system that you may have, and values end up being things that stay with us for a long, long time. What would you say are some of your top values or things that have resonated well with you both as you've sort of scaled up and shaped up your journeys?
So I think the first and most important thing is integrity. And this is one of the first things we prioritize in the funds we look for. A founder without integrity can do anything with your money.
True.
So if you look for a founder with really, really high quality integrity, intellectual honesty, openness with your investors. One, that makes for much better investment because they are much, much more likely to do something good. And I think the second thing is a lot of the times when founders have integrity and intellectual honesty, they tend not to avoid the problem. Sometimes the company has a doom problem that's not a problem right now. And founders who don't tend to be intellectually honest, a lot of time try to put that aside and say, this is not affecting me right now, so let me not think about it. But founders who are able to say, okay, this is a big problem for us. This is not good for the company. I need to be able to go and talk to my LPs, to my advisors, to my investors, and say, here is an issue. How can you help me solve this? And to have that kind of value system in a founder is what we really look for and how we try to do it at the fund. So we try to just ask everyone, as many people as we can. We go to all the conferences, ask every single developer, what would you look for in a fund? What is the support system you needed over the last 6 months? And how could we beat all the other investors of today? And if you go up and just ask everyone that in the community, eventually you're going to get the playbook on how to be the market leader in the industry.
I love that point on integrity, but how do you test that, especially at pre-seed, young founders, not a lot of people references as you would with a more experienced founder? How have you typically found yourself testing that thesis out?
So a really good thing you can do is in every early stage company, there's going to be at least one or two things that are not good for the company and don't look good for the company. As an investor, it's your job to find those things when you do your due diligence. But if you can ask the founder that question, and depending on their answer, it gives you a really, really good roadmap on how they do it. If they try and play down the problem, differentiate the question to something else, or talk about something else unrelated to the issue, that's a really core sign that there isn't integrity. But if they talk about, we understand the issue completely, here's our plan for how we can fix it, any support and advice would be amazing. That kind of difference in perspective on the problem is a really, really good way to judge a founder's integrity and mindset.
How about you, Samyak? What have been sort of the top values for you?
I think two things really. One is that over time we've come to acknowledge that it quite literally takes a village for you to be successful, both as a person and as a company. And what really happens is the way, not now, but maybe usually media shows it as just the two founders who were like extremely visionary and built out the company. Sure, true to a large extent. But I think it's very important to acknowledge and take along the institutions that have helped you early on, because you don't want to, or we personally don't want to build a company that, ditches the institutions that backed us early once we become successful. Sure, sometimes you have to take hard decisions on letting people go because that doesn't just sit well with the overall, path for the company. But I think being honest and being good about it, you can always choose to be good about the hard decisions. I think that's very important. And in our world, like biotech, tech at large, there's a lot of perception and story, and that's important because you have to show vision to raise the funds at a very early stage. But what we have come to realize is that Arman and I need to be very honest to each other. So we need to be very honest about what's real between the both of us at least. And if we are doing something for the vision side of things or perception side of things, it's very important to acknowledge and realize that you're doing it for that purpose.
And this is also something we see quite a lot. A lot of times founders, especially founders who are building a passion project, are trying to build something that fits their passion and vision instead of what would be the best company. And a lot of times you have to be able to go to the founder and say, okay, can you separate what you want to dream build and what is the right decision for the company?
Right.
Yeah, and I think it becomes all the more interesting when one person is more passionate about a particular topic and one person is more focused on the business, so on and so forth. That's an advantage because then the decisions you both agree on is the most optimal on both sides, but it's a disadvantage because, there might be that disagreement. Right. So I think knowing that the other person is being honest and knowing that both the people want what's best for the company is very, very important. So I think having faith, having trust, and taking along the people that help you build the company is very, very important.
Love that. If you were to give one advice to listeners, whether that's parents who are shaping careers of young kids or it's young entrepreneurs looking to deep dive into the entrepreneurship journey like both of you, what would be that one piece of advice you would like them to remember from your journey so far? Samyak?
Yeah, I think something that we have come to realize the core thing you can do as a young founder or just a young professional is apply to as much as you possibly can. Like a lot of people, eventually us at the start as well, we would think that we're too early for this program, or we're too early for that competition, we're too early for this grant. And over time, we've realized just apply to as many opportunities as you can, say yes to as much as you can, and then figure out later how you want to go about it. Because saying no is something you can always do. Don't worry about what happens if you don't get in or what happens if you fail at something. I think just apply and just keep applying.
So increase the surface area and luck will find your way,
essentially
right?
that.
Like that's
increase the
love
surface
that.
area of opportunities, because all you need are like 2 or 3 good core opportunities
Yeah.
to build that base.
How about you, Krish?
So for the kids, do not be afraid to start. The first start is extremely difficult because fear of failure is something that's in everyone. And starting for the first time, I remember when I left school, I was talking to my dad and I was saying, what if it doesn't work out? How would I go back? He said, if it does work out, you won't have to go back. They'll put a poster of you up there. So don't be afraid to start, don't be afraid to jump, and do not be afraid to fall at all. And on the parent side, you need to be a harness for your kid. Not a rope, not a ladder, but a harness, and let them climb themselves, but be there to catch them if they fall. I think a lot of times parents tend to go one in either direction. Either they try to hold them and keep them safe, or they try to push them in the direction that they feel. But I think the job as a parent is not to choose, but to support and be there for the choices and hold them up when they need them.
On the parent side, I think what really helps is knowing that irrespective of whether you succeed or you fail, you can go back to like mama and papa. Sure, they'd be happy if you succeed, but they won't like treat you like everything is ruined if you don't succeed at things. So exactly, yeah, just like being a harness. It's very hard. Like I don't want to think about it because I'm like 21. We have like 10 years. But essentially, how do you create an environment where it's not like too comfortable, but also not like mentally exhausting?
Yeah, I hope I get there definitely. So last question to wrap up, as you know, this is part of Thai Talks, and both of you I know have a personal connection with Thai. Would love to know a little bit about how Thai, as an organization has supported your journey, as well as how do you see communities like Thai really play a role within the ecosystem?
So, I mean, for me, my first experience with investing was with Thai when I was 15, on the early stage side. So I attended the event, I watched all the pitches, I understood almost nothing, but it was a really good experience for me because I got to see founders pitch really, really passionately. And that was a big inspiration for me because I was able to see how beautiful and inspiring the entrepreneurship journey was. For me, the experience with Thai was amazing for me because I got to get that experience so young and get to see this world of entrepreneurship so young. And that experience for me just helped me build my internal thesis of why do I invest in certain people. And being able to expose to the Thai community, all the charter members who have so much experience and so much knowledge for us to learn from. I think the community built at Thai is really, really good because you get to not only experience people to learn from on the founder side, but also get to meet and experience really, really high quality people on the investor side.
Yeah, and for me, family friends back home are all part of, or are still a part of the chapter in Chennai. So have grown up attending a few events, mostly like panels where like Thai was hosting them. And then most recently, I think in July of 23, we met Prantik. He was like standing and eating lunch with all of us, and essentially we bugged his brain for like 1 hour, and he had like the patience to really like talk us through Singapore, because we were very new to Singapore then. So a lot of help on just generally life in Singapore and what the reality and so on is, and how to build in this part of the world. And yeah, generally it's just a great community to be a part of, especially I think when you're away from home. Like a lot of people across global chapters are away from home, who might be India, who might be Singapore, wherever. So it's just like a community you can go back to for mentorship, for friendship. And hoping to be a part of it over the years.
Love that. So I really loved the conversation with Krish and Samyak, and definitely the 3 things I took away from this conversation. Number 1, I think what Krish and Samyak alluded to, which is to go all in. If you have a big passion, go and follow your dreams. Number 2 was really around the power of strong decision making and pivoting and transitioning and constantly learning and scaling yourself as well as what you're building. Last but not the least was really about the power of mentorship, right? Whether that's at home, which was their parents, or the community around them, or organizations that they've been working with very closely, and really being able to increase your luck surface area, right? Go out and explore as many opportunities as you can as you build this out. So if you have any feedback or suggestions on topics or speakers we should cover, we love to get them. So please do write to us and share that. Would also love for you to subscribe to TIE Talks, where you will see many more episodes around entrepreneurship, investment, and impact as we build out our presence. Thank you.